Welcome to a Glastonbury Romance. Let's get right into it so we can all go back on with whatever else we're doing tonight. So when last we left Glastonbury, sorry, it looks like there's something stuck in my beard, but it's just like I got white hairs now because of, everything that's going on. So good reason to shave. Get rid of all this white hair I'm noticing. Anyway, Mary, or I think what's his face? The Tom was putting the moves on Mary, or Mary was putting the moves on Tom, and she fell off the table. And now she's saying, "John is fonder of you in one way than he'll ever be of me, even if we were married," she said gravely. Barter thought he had never seen gray eyes look so large and dark and appealing as hers looked now. "She's getting at me to make it up between them," he thought. And the idea that all the kindness in her tone was just to cajole him made it something grow rough as a peat brick beneath his ribs. "What the deuce are you talking about, Mary?" he said sulkily, rubbing his face with both his hands in an angry, independent, proud boy might do, who had been kissed by a woman who was attempting to play the mother over him. "You're not such a fool," she said, "as not to know what he's desperately fond of you." "Oh, well, John's all right," he muttered awkwardly, thinking in his mind, "This is the worst of those clever women. They're always probing people with what they call psychological questions. I've never come and seen her again. I'll take Tossie Stickles out to Bushycombe tomorrow night. It's no use. I'd have to known it was no use coming to her. She only wants to play some game with me to get at John. John'll be helpless in her hands if she does get a hold of him." Her next question made him jerk up his back very straight in the leather chair and draw his eyebrows together till they made a continuous line across his brow. What do you think it's going to be? "What made you think you liked me enough to want to marry me, Tom?" He looked first to the right of her dark flashing eyes and white cheeks, and then to the left. His expression at that moment so exactly resembled that of a great Newfoundland dog, whom she had trouble with her greys, that she smiled at him with renowned sweetness. "You're a dear, Tom, do you know it?" she said, taking her elbow off the chimney-piece. "I like you a lot better than you ever liked me. I could have made you happy, Tom, if I'd married you. A good deal happier, I'm afraid, than I'll ever make him. And yet, my dear, I see you're dead in the coffin. If I could pluck it out of you, whatever it is," her heavy lower lips began trembling a little, "whatever it is that John likes in you so much more than—" She bit her lip and, lifting her head back, stretched out her arms, clutching her hands. "Oh dear, it's a business, isn't it, old Tom, this affair of being alive?" "Oh, that's true, lady." She let her arms drop to her sides with a sigh and heaved through her whole body. Tom Barter rose slowly to his feet. He felt now that he had wronged her with his vulgar suspicions. After all, she was laying her heart onto him. She was a good, honest Norfolk girl. Perhaps what she said was true. Perhaps she could have made him happy. He moved up close to her. She could see by his eyes that he was going to touch her. No, she murmured. "You and I are too old for that, Tom. Listen, my dear, why don't you do what John is always talking to me about? Why don't you chuck Philip and work with John for a bit? That man wants you. You know he does. He'd jump out of his skin to have you with him." They stared at each other with a long, puzzled stare after these words had left their lips. Both of them, with an unconscious movement, glanced towards the door. Mary had not had the least idea that she was going to suggest what she had just suggested. It was as if the presence of Mr. Gurd under the same roof had confused her wits. "No, of course you can't leave Philip," she said hurriedly. "It's your work, I know, and that's your plane, too. I can't think what made me think that just then. It was only, oh, I feel that both you and Tom, want something to change, something to get smashed in our life, so that we can start again. Isn't that true? But you needn't speak. I know too well it's true." They looked at each other, then, with another of their long, heavy-eyed, puzzled, unyielding East Anglican looks, those old heathen Selden looks, full of the obduracy of rooted poplars and driving sleet. Oh, that's nice, huh? They each needed something from the other, something which, in all the world, the other alone could give. But between them they seemed to emerge, emanating like a monstrous offspring from their sterile psychic embrace, a huge, dark obstacle not to be overstepped. Mary had come out of that room where the presence of Mr. Garrett was so odious to her, and where the whole aura reeked of those Glastonbury morbidities. She had come out with a reckless urge of forlorn hope to get some help from Tom. God damn hair. Should I have it in here? He had come from this wretched vigil in that cafe at a desperate run and with a blind cap like a frantic prisoner catching at one chance in 1,000 to get he knew not what from this Norfolk girl. But their mutual plunge ended here. They both knew it. Ended here with this long, sullen, helpless look. Ended here with the same baffled frustration with which their friendship had always ended when it tried to break away from the impeding limits set by the fatality of their own characters. "Can I get out of here?" he said, when his eyes had drawn up to the great empty plummet net he had let down from the unanswering depth of her eyes. "Out of this place without meeting anyone?" She gave a quick sigh as if aroused by his words from a trance that was obscurely baffling into a reality that was labor and struggle. "Of course, Tom," she said. "Come this way. I'll let you out through this back." She blew out the 2 candles on the table, and with his nostrils full of the sour taste of carbonic acid gas, he followed her to the door. There was one moment, as she touched the door handle by the dying flicker of the fire, that she felt a longing, that he felt a longing. Not sensual nor passionate, but simply sad and love-starved, to clasp her well-known form in his hands. But he did not dare. The moment perished forever in the white smoke of those 2 tall candles, and he followed her on tiptoe through the dim-lighted hall. He was not unaware of the irony of his passing now, with only a silent nod and a casual glance, those 2 pretty figures seated at the kitchen table enjoying their supper. Purged he surely was at that moment on his wonted lechery. Mary opened the door into the garden, shivered a little, for he had forgotten to put on any wrap, led him across the daffodil bed and the fading crocus to the edge of King Edgar's lawn. Water break. Here she gave him her hand and let him squeeze it in his strong air pilot fingers till it tingled and smarted. "You know that place in the wall," she called out softly after him, "where it's easy to climb?" He made no answer. He only turned and lifted his hand to his head, saluting her thus as he would have saluted some superior officer if he had been, what would it suit him so well to be, the careful sergeant major of a garrison of besieged soldiers. She watched his short, sturdy figure after that, as it vanished with never another look around. A tide of inexpressible sadness flowed through her heart. Tom was gone, and she had got scant comfort from him, and Tom was gone, back to his wretched quarters in High Street. Or would his lonely, unsatisfied mood put him into his stubborn head to drift on past his other door, his own door, to that cheerful Northland room, which was her own prepared bridal chamber. She means John Crow's place. She glanced up at the great broken tower columns of the vanished nave of the Abbey Church. Would other girls, all the way down the centuries, she thought, look up at those 2 stupendous pillars and fill the space between them and their sad imagination with the high carved arch full of wafted incense and choir echoes and deep-voiced prayers? What had she hoped to get from Tom, or he from her? Neither of them had seemed to know. It had all ended anyway, just as so many of their old counters had done, in a sense of weary frustration. Ruins! Ruins! It was not only an ancient stone that baffled human hopes, held up their broken outlines, their sad skeleton patterns as resting places for the birds of the night. She was on the point of turning, of retracing her steps across the dark flower beds, where fading crocus and new-sprouting tulips drank in silent long-breathed draughts, the secret influence of the darkness, when she was suddenly caught up, completely caught up, out of herself, as she never in her life had been before by any natural power. There, very low down in the western sky, above a couple of yards, according to human measurement, above the bounding wall of the enclosure, was a coracle-like crystal shell of the crescent moon in her first quarter. There was nothing into which it could be compared. Unique in all the universe of matter, and only by reason of the association hung about it on 25,000 years of human yearning, it floated there before her, daughter and darling of the dark terrestrial orb, elf-waif of the infinite night. What hands, what arms had stretched forth to it, out of their human misery, brown arms, white arms, black arms, what heart cried, I want, I want, I want, had been tossed up towards it from groaning, hairy chests and soft-swelling, tender breasts, and the troubled nerves of bewildered children. And ever and especially had it been the comfort of the accomplice and the confederate of women, gathering their life streams toward itself, guarding their mystic chastity, nourishing their withdrawals, their reticences, their furtive retreats and denials, companioning them when all else failed. When all else failed! It would draw the vast, bottomless salt tides towards it, this slender night waif, this leaf of tender sorrow, this filmy weft of hope against hope. Ere it had rounded to its full, shoals of glittering fins would follow its pathway across the Atlantic. On far-off universal moorlands it reflected would turn the ripples to silver. In pools where even the wild geese in their equinoctial migrations never disturbed the silence, its frail image would rock against the reeds. On no different, on no changed a shape from this, upon which she now gazed and trembled, the great magicians of antiquity had stared and muttered, their predictions confounded, their inspirations perverted, their wits turned. Here floated the virgin mistress of the tragic madness of maids, the patroness of all the fires of man's laws. Here was the girl-child from the dim shores of ancient anarchy, at whose bridal, bright and horned head, the kings and the priests of man-made tradition have always shivered and quaked in their sacred sandals. She had been the tutory mistress of all sterile passions, of all who revolt against the mothers, that had led the virgins of prophecy to shatter the world's laws. That shapeless conch of dangerous whiteness, tossing herself through the scudding drifts of ship-swallowing seas, rocked like a sea-mew in the rigging of doomed ships, gleaming in the cold dews of uncounted dawns upon blood-stained Golgothas and lost battlefields, and now shining down, calm and lovely, upon hillside fairy rings and upon smooth, wide-stretching glittering sands, has always been the forlorn hope of the impossible, has always been the immortal challenge to what is, from the waving margins of what might be. The popular opinion that the moon is a planetary fragment broken off from the Earth or from the Sun is probably a gross and clumsily conceived error. Much more likely it is that she is the last remaining fragment of some earlier stellar system, a system of material forms and shapes now altogether lost, but in its origin nearing to the beginning of things and the ambiguous imaginations of the primal cause. Surely, not only in the religion of this planet has she played a dominant and indistinguishable role, but she has always been on the side of the weak and the sick against the strong and the well-constituted. With her silvery horns of mystery gathered in the folds of that blue robe of bearing, up those divine feet of the maid mother of the crucified, she has challenged the whole authoritative reign of cause and effect itself. And it was this whiteness beyond all whiteness, it was this whiteness, like the wet curves of unimaginable seashells, and like the spray about the prows of fairy ships, that now came with its magical touch to bring healing to Mary Crow. The girl stood transfixed on the chilly edge of that bed of cold, pale-faced, immature tulips. She stared and stared at the celestial visitant, as if she had never before seen the moon under any sky. What does it mean? What does it make me feel? She thought. Is there something about it that every woman who has ever lived in the Glastonbury must feel? Something like that Lake Village woman felt? Something that immured medieval nuns were comforted by? Her body as well as her spirit fell now into a wordless prayer in that white fleeting moment. Immortal. I'm sorry. Let me read that again. 1 second. Her body as well as her spirit fell now into a wordless prayer to that white, floating, immortal creature. Bury, oh, bury your strange secret in my breast, the girl heart cried out. Bury it deep, deep in my womb, so that henceforth to the end of my days something cold and free and uncouth and uncaught may make me strong. As soon as Miss Matt Decker and Mr. Gerd were out of the house, the former explained to the latter that he had an important visit to make that night before he retired to a woman dying of cancer near the Crow factory. Wow, that's some real Glastonbury shit right there. That's the pure stuff. That moon bullshit. It's great, isn't it? Well, until next time, I'll see you in Glastonbury.